So there's one major disadvantage that we're going to focus on as to why attacking Syria is very, very bad. A military strike to initiate regime change would cause a nuclear disaster. Subpoint A, regime change in Syria would lead to an escalation in regional conflagration. According to David W. Lesh, professor of Middle East history at Trinity University, intervention, moreover, could result in unpredictable consequences. The regime, in its last spasms, might unleash a conventional or chemical weapons attack against its neighbors, including Israel. This likely would ignite a regional conflagration. The government could also lose all constraints on action and employ chemical weapons against its own populace, which we've already seen done. It can also use these against outside military forces, resulting in incalculable death and destruction. The threat of outside intervention has been one of the primary inhibiting factors against the Syrian regime's use of weapons of mass destruction. If the West intervenes militarily, the regime would figure it has nothing to lose and all of the gloves would come off. Subpoint B. Syria is the catalyst in the Middle East that will set the winds of war in motion. Marcel Chauvin, Middle East correspondent who has covered events in the region for over 18 years, says that al-Mufta, Assad's former propaganda minister, stated, "We have strategic weapons and we can retaliate. Essentially, the strategic weapons are aimed at Israel," reported by the Ynet News in Jerusalem. Iran also warned that it would blame Israel if the United States goes after Assad. "No military attack will be waged against Syria," said Hussein Sheikh Holsam, a member of Iran's Islamic Consultative Assembly. Yet, if such an incident takes place, which is impossible, the Zionist regime will be the first victim of a military attack. To counter the threat, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, in a televised statement, said that Israel would respond powerfully if Syria or any nation tries to do it harm. Subpoint C. Attacking Syria would increase threats to U.S. allies in the Middle East. Elad Benari, reporter for Israeli National News, says that if Damascus comes under attack, Tel Aviv will be targeted too, and a full-scale war against Syria will actually issue a license for attacking Israel, said an anonymous Syrian army source. If Syria is attacked, Israel will also be set on fire, and such attack will in turn engage Syria's neighbors, he added. Thus, a U.S. attack on Syria will herald frequent strikes and attacks on Israel, not just by Damascus and its allies in retaliation, but by extremist groups. Subpoint D. A strike against Syria would result in the further destabilization of the Middle East and North Africa. According to Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, stated in the New York Times, the planned strike by the United States against Syria, despite strong opposition from many countries and major political and religious leaders, including the Pope, will result in more innocent victims and escalation, spreading the conflict far beyond Syrian borders. A strike would increase violence and unleash a new wave of terrorism. It could undermine multilateral efforts to resolve the Iranian nuclear problem and Israeli-Palestinian conflicts, and further destabilize the Middle East and North Africa. It could throw the entire system of international law and order out of balance. Subpoint E. Further destabilization of the Middle East would cause an already unstable region to escalate to all-out war. According to George John, a writer for the Canadian Press, Hassan Nasrallah, the Secretary General of Hezbollah, declared in a TV speech, "If you hit Dahiya, we will hit Tel Aviv. If you strike Martyr Rafiki Hariri International Airport in Beirut, we'll strike your Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv. If you hit all our ports, we will hit your ports. If you attack our refineries, we'll attack your refineries. If you bomb our factories, we will bomb your factories." As observed in the Jerusalem Press Post, something is stirring in the Middle East. The winds of war are blowing, picking up speed with each passing day, and the threat to Israel is growing steadily more alarming. The storm might very well just be around the corner. Subpoint F. An all-out war would also lead to a nuclear disaster. According to CBS Washington, D.C., with contributions from the Associated Press, September 5, 2013, a Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson warned any military intervention in Syria would create a nuclear disaster. If a warhead by design or by chance were to hit a miniature neutron source reactor near Damascus, the consequences could be catastrophic. According to Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Alexander Lukashevich. Lukashevich also went on to say that if the military strike were launched without seeking approval from the United Nations Security Council, that new suffering from other countries as the Middle East and North Africa would occur. He added that the region could be at risk of contamination by highly enriched uranium. It would no longer be possible to account for nuclear material in its safety and control. Subpoint G. War in the Middle East would lead to the use of nuclear retaliation by Israel. Michael Chevin, Middle East correspondent, has covered events in the region also for 18 years. Netanyahu called a surprise meeting of the security cabinet during the day, his second of the week, and then publicly warned Assad's government not to seek any reprisal against Israel. Israel is not part of the civil war in Syria, but if we identify any attempt to hurt us, We will respond and respond powerfully, he said. Cohen says Syria has tons of chemical weapons and thousands of rockets it can fire at Tel Aviv and other Israeli cities, and Iranian-backed Hezbollah in Lebanon has as many as 100,000 rockets aimed at Israel. A massive rocket onslaught would overwhelm Israel's missile defense system and could lead to mass Israeli civilian casualties and a devastating Israeli response. Cohen said, if Syria responds with chemical weapons, Israel may respond asymmetrically, he has said, alluding to the use of nuclear weapons. I now stand open for cross-examination.
So let's talk about subpoint F, where you say it could equal a nuclear disaster. The scenario for that piece of evidence is not the use of nuclear weapons, is it?
In subpoint F, I said it could result in a nuclear disaster.
Right. Not because somebody launches a nuclear war, a nuclear missile. How do we get to the nuclear disaster in subpoint F? What's it talking about?
In subpoint E, it's saying that the region will become destabilized and escalate to an all-out war. And in subpoint F, we're saying that if a warhead, by coincidence, were to hit
Hit a nuclear reactor in Syria,
Damascus,
right? So it's
yes.
talking about nuclear energy. It's talking about a nuclear reactor sitting there and oops, we accidentally bombed it and now there's been a release of radiation.
Yes, precisely.
Right, okay, good. G is talking about Netanyahu making the argument that threatens Syria and says, don't you dare respond back to us because if you do, we, Israel, will crush you, right?
Yes.
Excellent. What context is he telling Syria, do not dare retaliate against us? Why would he threaten them? Why would he need to tell Syria, don't retaliate? What did Israel do?
He's saying that because if the U.S. uses military efforts...
No. It wasn't an if that Netanyahu was talking about. It was an actual. What did Israel do to Syria? Didn't Israel bomb a transportation of some chemical weapons, supposed chemical weapons from Syria to Hezbollah just about 6 to 8 months ago?
But this isn't talking about that. This is talking about if Iran or Syria were to attack Israel, that they're going to retaliate powerfully.
Yeah, but Israel has already attacked Assad in the last 12 months, right? Because they felt that Syria was transferring chemical weapons to Hezbollah.
Yes, but we're
Well,
not...
that's okay. It happened. Did it escalate into nuclear war?
No, but this isn't talking about specifically if Syria attacks. This is talking about if the U.S. attacks Syria, that they will respond.
I got your scenario. Good.